Hi folks, welcome to the BTN podcast, man. We've not done this for a while, so we're going to be a bit rusty.
Aye, we're going to be rubbish, aye.
Aye. Well, no rubbish. I think we shouldn't say rubbish. That shouldn't be the way it goes. So we've got Mahmood here. You want to introduce Mahmood? Mansoor.
Aye.
Sorry.
It's the same now. You want to introduce yourself? Actually, that would be better.
My name is Mansoor Mahmood. I'm the Imam at the Kirkcaldy Central Mosque. I've been there for 3 years now. And I never thought I'd be able to settle in Kirkcaldy, but now I can't imagine ever leaving it. Just a background on myself, how did I get into the job? My family was quite religious, so I was sent to a single faith secondary school, after which I specialised in Islamic studies. After secondary school, went on to Egypt, trained as an imam, and when I came back, that was the job that I was always going to do.
Mm-hmm. So where were you born? Were you born in?
Glasgow. I was born and bred in Glasgow. Yeah, grew up in Glasgow, and then my secondary education from 11 onwards was then down south in Nottingham,
right.
And then carrying on to Egypt, and then finishing off, and then I came back and started the job here.
That's a big shift, Glasgow to Egypt to Kirkcaldy of all places.
It is, yeah, but it was an experience though. I've experienced a lot of things with those moves over that period of time. Whilst I was in Egypt, I was there during the protests when Mubarak was overthrown.
Wow.
So I got a chance to see live tanks here, live gunshots and things like that I'd never seen before. So it was brilliant.
Thankfully there's not much of that in Kirkcaldy.
There's a wee bit less, I would say. A wee bit less tanks.
Slightly less tanks, aye.
Yeah, no gunshots yet. I hope I never hear them here.
Aye, hopefully, aye. I reckon I'll deal with that very well.
That's it. We've also got Bill Mair here. You're sort of going to join in now and again, I think.
Yeah. Well, basically, my role in this conversation is as an independent socialist, but I used to be a Bible scholar, so at some point later on we'll have a wee chat about aspects of Islam, and then what I can do is chip in wee bits about where Bible and Christianity is maybe the same, or where Bible and Christianity is different, and that's about it. So for a lot of the time I may just be sitting here saying nothing, which will be a great surprise to everybody.
I don't think you've ever been on the podcast and said nothing.
I know. I'm not saying nothing yet because here I am and I'm talking already. So it's all good. It's all good, man.
Bill kind of helps us in that sense. Like if you are talkative, it's a better kind of idea. It's a lot better to have a talkative person rather than a kind of.
Yeah.
Like we've had people on before that didn't talk much at all.
Yeah.
And it's like trying to get blood out of stem. Sometimes it's quite difficult.
But as Bill, it's hard to get him to shut up.
That's right.
What you want back in the stem sometimes.
That's right. What you want is a happy medium, and that's why I brought you Mansoor Mahmood.
Also, thanks to Bill for actually getting this set up. We contacted an imam from another mosque. Don't know which mosque it was, but he pretty quickly refused to do it. Mm-hmm. So we really appreciate you coming on and doing this. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So part of why we got you on is we found that on mainstream news channels and stuff, when you see Muslims, they tend to be sort of pent up and they tend to be not very sort of laughy and jokey and stuff.
Yeah. Well, especially the imams, like if you watch like Channel 4 documentaries and stuff, the imams are sort of going, what are they doing with this footage sort of thing? They're always kind of on edge and stuff like that.
They're frowning.
Aye.
Whereas you're quite happy and bubbly and nice of it all.
Yeah.
So we thought it'd be a nice change and it'd be a nice representation for sort of your views and stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the reason we got you on.
There you go.
Aye. So outside of being an imam, what are you doing? What are you into?
Just general sports. I love my football. I'll play snooker.
Oh, you play snooker?
Here and then, and I'll stay at home most of the days watching the comedy channel.
What do you watch?
I'm into Friends, so I can watch that over and over again. And I just got a Sky just about a month back, and that's all I've been watching.
Just obsessed with Friends. You know got Netflix?
No, I haven't. I did get it, but I after a while I felt that it wasn't worth it because I hardly was using it.
Well, it's cheaper than Sky. How much? Sky is expensive, isn't it?
I don't know.
It is, but I don't. You don't?
No.
Yeah. I don't know if you can get Friends on Netflix.
Aye, I can the entire thing.
Yeah,
So you can total binging your pants.
Yeah. Well, I might change to that.
There you go. So let's talk about the sort of the beginnings. What sort of made you want to get to be an imam, sort of thing? What was the initial cause?
It was the excuse me, it was the school that I attended, the single faith boarding school. And it wasn't the job of the imam that I wanted really. It was to get to Egypt. Where I wanted to go. So I started in first year of the secondary school side, and I saw that when you finish the secondary school, you've got the 3 years of the seminary, and then you get sent to Cairo. So I just wanted to go get away from home. Initially, it was that, and then as I progressed through the secondary school, my knowledge of the religion increased, and I understood what the university was. So the place that we were sent in Cairo, the university can be compared to like Oxford or Cambridge in terms of getting a degree in Islamic studies. So that kind of pushed me more to get there, and plus I was obsessed with ancient Egyptian history from primary school. I think every primary school does that as a project.
Yeah, I think so.
Every single one, yeah. So I always wanted to see Tutankhamun's mask, and that's the first thing I did when I got to Cairo. So it was a number of things that pushed me there. Initially, it wasn't Islamic studies, but then it did turn into that when I matured and I understood what I was supposed to do.
See, I feel like if I went to Egypt, I would be disappointed. Because my knowledge of Egypt is always the ancient stuff, and then I would go there and it's more modern now, isn't it? So I'd be upset about that.
It is.
I want to see. I'd love to go back in time and see Egypt as ancient Egypt. I think that would be super.
Is it so modernised that it's like city right here and then a pyramid here?
Cairo's still got that, old rustic type of look.
Right.
It's still got that.
Right.
So you do feel like you're kind of in the ancient city.
Right.
In certain parts of Cairo. The pyramids are quite far out of the city. They're in an area called Giza, so it's about half an hour from the city.
Is it?
Yeah.
Because the footage that I've seen I've never been to Cairo. You take them from within the city and you just look out and you can see the pyramids. But I guess they're pretty enormous. Even though they're half a mile away, you can see them.
I think that's a small village that's near.
Oh really?
Well, that would be Giza and not Cairo.
Right.
So Giza's just outside Cairo city. Right. And when you get in, you'll realise you're in Cairo because you're stuck in traffic wherever you are. It's worse than London. Cairo.
I've seen like places like India and that, and China. China's ridiculous for the amount of people that are just
Japan is
everywhere.
Japan's quite overcrowded as well.
Are they kind of? It seems too busy for me. How can you do that?
No, even Edinburgh's too busy for you.
Just for me as well. I don't know how I survived in Cairo after staying in Kirkcaldy. Now I'm just used to that quiet.
Even Kirkcaldy's a bit crowded.
Is it?
Just any like there's people, just any sort of amount of people.
Aye.
Yeah.
Sure. It's way too much.
Yeah.
That's it. So how long were you in Cairo?
5 years.
5 years, right.
5 years. So the degree was for 4 years, and then when I finished, I kind of just stayed there for a year just to chill out before I came back.
Nice.
Your gap year.
Well, yeah, that was the gap year because there was a lot of pressure before that. Because you remember, the degree was in Arabic. Which isn't my first language.
Right.
So there was always pressure whenever you were doing exams, whenever you're sitting in lectures. I wouldn't 100% understand everything they were saying. And then when I was writing in the exam, I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't express it in the way I wanted to because of that language barrier. So there was always pressure in passing the exam. So that's why after the fourth year, when I did finish, I took that year as a gap year and stayed in Cairo and loved it.
Did you take that time to sort of learn more languages and stuff?
I did, yeah. I actually joined the language centre then, and my language became much better. But,
so I assume you're fluent now.
Well, I don't see what was the point because I haven't spoken Arabic since I left, so I've gone back to the beginning again. If I was to have a conversation, I can. I would stutter quite a lot, but I wouldn't be as fluent as it was in that last year.
Right.
That last year when I was there.
That's not too bad, that's no. So you moved from Glasgow to Egypt, and then you did you move like back to Glasgow and then to Kirkcaldy?
Yeah, I came back to Glasgow, and there's one thing I've missed out. So before I became an Imam, I was a school teacher,
right,
for a year. So I came back, and I wasn't always the most confident of people. So to be an Imam, confidence is key because you're always on stage. And that kind of kept me back, and I thought, well, I'm not a good public speaker, I can't get the crowd going, so I'll see if I can do something else. So I used my Islamic Studies degree, which is recognised here. I used that to get into the University of Aberdeen to do a 1-year teacher's training course in religious education.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
right.
And I did the job for a year, but it was too much. I couldn't handle it.
Too many youngins.
Yeah, but not that. That's just part of it. But you're working after school every day.
Oh yeah.
You're working on the
So
weekends.
you never think about that, do you?
There's so much admin work is unbelievable. You don't have a social life. And
That's what you think of when you're at scale. You just think, oh, that's them. They just go ahead.
They only work for 9 till 3. And then that's it.
they don't.
No.
And they're really dedicated. They spend their full time on their job, and they absolutely love it. I can't live with it. I need to. Well, when I leave work, I want to get away from it, and I want to leave my work behind. But you can't. You can't. You've got
There was
marking.
Quite often I heard teachers talking about how they didn't go to bed until 2 or 3 in the morning because they were up marking homework and sort of giving comments on kids that hadn't spoilt something right or something.
Yeah.
It just seems like super long time.
And they're not exaggerating. You can't, like back in the days, a teacher just open a book and just tick and cross. You can't do that nowadays. You've got a code, so if you've got a spelling mistake, you'll have to, underline it and then put SP on the side with, you have to make sure it's red, and then for a grammar mistake, you'll have to make sure it's green, and you've got different colour pens, and then you've got your heads of department checking that. And if you're not on top of that, you're not keeping up to the standard of that teachers need to follow. And a lot of teachers, lose their job because they're not fulfilling the standard.
But you're not. But see, the thing that annoys me is you're not even paid for those hours that you're working. You're paid
not.
from what is it, 9 to 5? I'm guessing is what you're paid for.
Yeah.
And then the rest is just well, you just did it.
Well, but you're only paid for the classes that you teach, which is until 3:30. And then,
oh, really?
Yeah. And then 90% of the teachers will stay after that to prepare for the next day. Some teachers will come in 2 hours early, prepare everything for the next day, just so that they can get out at 3:30. So you really have to be on the ball. I'm quite laid back as well, and you can't live like that. So I did a year. And I got the qualification, so I did get something out of it. I can return to it if I want to. So I've got that benefit there with me. And plus I picked up valuable teaching skills.
Well, that's good. You can sort of go down the route of like private tutoring if you wanted to do that. Kind of thing.
Yeah, but I don't know if anybody asked for religious education. It's always...
I prefer private tutoring. I can imagine, as I said it, I was like, maybe not.
If it was maths, English or science or something, then yeah.
Maybe I.
As an imam, you could use that to your advantage. If there's kids coming in, you can help them out. And
well, we do classes. Children are sent into the mosque to learn how to recite scripture in Arabic. So I do apply those teaching skills within the mosque, so they feel like they're in school. So there's a bit more respect whilst they come to the mosque. If you see in most mosques, children will be quite relaxed because they'll see it as an extracurricular kind of activity that they're doing. But because I've taught in a school and I've created the atmosphere, they feel like it is a school when they come in. So that's much easier for me than to teach them.
Definitely,
it's a nightmare. I don't know if any of you have taught a class before.
Never.
Just don't do it. Don't do it.
I did some teaching in Spain,
Yeah.
Secondary school. And because I was a mature student when I was doing my degree, you do a year abroad as I was studying Spanish. They decided, because I was older, that I could just take the class. So normally what they would do is with the students is you'd be like an assistant, like you get here, like a language assistant. You might get French and German, Spanish.
Yeah.
But I was, about 30 years old, and I had a child of my own. So they said, you can just take the class, you'll be fine. And it was just a disaster. My idea of discipline was just like eyeballing someone and staring at them and then shouting at the top of my voice. And these kids, Spain's very different from Britain, right? In Spain, it's just like a completely different dynamic.
Yeah.
These kids ran rings around me. Ran rings around me. I had to do that for about 8 months, an academic year.
Yeah.
And one of my options when I graduated was to go into teaching, and that's never happened. But I'm very pleased because of your story you just told me there.
They'll figure you out they'll give you a chance on the first day, just to see how you are, and if you show any bit of leniency, that's it. Weakness, you're finished. You've had it.
Like dogs, they can smell your fears.
Well, Mr. McMaster dealt with that.
They're like that, yeah.
Like Mr. McMaster, he dealt with that pretty well.
Aye, definitely. Aye.
He used to walk after you, and then he'd stand above you, and he'd drop a weight on the table right in front of you. Then you'd hear the and instantly the whole classroom would just shut up. Nothing else was said after that. And that happened quite a few
I
times.
think there was a teacher.
He's not allowed to date anymore.
Yeah.
We found out a couple of years ago that he had to stop dating.
Oh, shit.
There was a teacher at Mom's school when she was younger. Used to throw a spear across the room, and just throw it directly at the sort of back wall all the time. That would have been scary.
A real spear?
A real spear.
Aye, the history teacher.
I was going to say, because when I was at school, we had corporal punishment, I had the belt, which I got with regularity.
Oh.
And then
I can just imagine.
oh yeah, all the time. The thing is, it doesn't make any difference because it hurts, and it still hurts every time. Your hand does get a bit tougher, but it still hurts.
And I've heard about competitions and stuff like that. People hate competitions to see how many times they can get the belt and stuff.
I just couldn't help getting the belt. And then, but then I was thinking, like, so if I was going to teach, because that's what I'm used to as a student, and I'm thinking, well, I'm going, I haven't even got that. I haven't even got the threat of corporal punishment. But throwing a spear across the room, that's creative. Way to make up for not having the belt, you know?
He must have some confidence doing that.
Definitely, I don't know exactly how many people he's killed, but I'm guessing 3. Guessing about 3.
That's a game.
I imagine he would be allowed to do that.
Definitely not. There's hitting somebody about and then throwing a spear.
But what was the other teacher you were talking about, Mr.
Psycho Oliver.
Psycho Oliver.
Used to swear and he decapitated somebody once. Somebody sort of stuck their head sort of at the door and he ran across the room and kicked the door shut. Nearly decapitated the guy a few times. It was an interesting guy.
Super.
He was there for years though.
Respect.
I never understand why.
I'm talking, you listen.
It's because no one
sounds right.
cared.
Oh yeah, basically, yeah. That's it. So you moved to Kirkcaldy, and did you move straight into this post sort of thing, or?
Yeah, straight in. It was through a friend that does business in Fife. And one of the shopkeepers asked him if he knew an English-speaking imam. Because before I came, all the imams were Urdu-speaking, Punjabi-speaking, and he says, "Well, yeah, I do know somebody." And at that time, I was speaking to friends saying that, well, I'm thinking of leaving teaching. It's too much. I'm not getting a social life. It's too difficult. And then he approached me. I came in for. I didn't want to come. I refused because I didn't want to do the imam job because I knew that if you get into the job you're stuck because you have to do prayers 5 times a day and you can't go anywhere. You have to always be around.
Like, really.
Yeah, I mean it is easy because all you have to do is lead the prayers, but then you have to stay put because when it comes to the time of prayer you have to come back and lead it. So I came in for a Friday prayer, delivered a sermon and led the prayer, and the funniest thing was they brought me in for an interview, and the first thing that they asked me was, "When can you start?"
Oh, no.
That's the first question, and I thought they must be really, really desperate. and it wasn't even a good sermon because I hadn't delivered a sermon since my student days.
Right.
You know, so I was stuttering on stage. It wasn't flowing, and I knew it was bad. If I was on the committee, I wouldn't have hired me. I would have said, thank you very much. We'll let you know. And so I told him, well, let me go home and I'll have a think about it. And then I just thought teaching imam, and I chose the imam position and I came.
That's it. It puts in mind a lot of what I think about Kirkcaldy sometimes. Is that that'll do, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't the best, but I will take him. Sort of thing.
The hard pressed to find something better. That's the issue. So it's 5 prayers a day. What are the times for these? 'Cause that seems like it would be hard to keep up with.
Well, when you get used to it, it's you do get used to it. When I came, I was living in the mosque, so it wasn't hard at all. You've got one before sunrise, which I would say is the most difficult one, and that's it. The rest of them are okay. But because I was living in the workplace, you know, out my bedroom door, I'm inside the mosque.
Right.
So I would get up, 10 minutes before the prayer, open the door, and we've got 2 guys that come in the morning, the same 2 guys every single day. So they would come in and do the preparations that you need to do for the prayer to begin, and I'll go and wash up. The most difficult thing is you need to wash up. And you need to wash your face, or part of that washing, maybe that's the most difficult thing. And then you've got one in the afternoon at 1:30. You've got one late afternoon, which will be a few hours after that one. You've got one just after sunset, and then you've got one when it's completely dark at night time.
Right.
And it changes obviously according to the sun. So in the summer, you've got the morning one, which is at 3:30 now, and then you've got the last one, which is at 11:30.
Right, right. That's obviously not everybody's coming in for all the time sort of things. Like.
No, mostly the congregation is very small. You've the afternoon prayer is, you've got maybe 20 people, and then other than that, there's 4 or 5, and it's just the ones that are retired that come.
Right.
Because everybody else is at work, and when you come back, the last thing they want to do is come to the mosque, because it's not within walking distance. Everybody's a drive away. So the congregation is less, which makes the job easier for us, because it puts less pressure on you. If you got about 50 people coming for the prayer, you know that it has to be perfect, and you have to perform, and when you sing, it has to be in a melodious voice, and people are going to be listening. But if you got 5 or 6 the same guys that come, you kind of get used to it, and then you relax when they come in. You know that you don't have to impress them.
There you go.
So those times in the morning when you first prayer and your last prayer, that coincides with the Ramadan times of fasting. Is that right? Would that mark the time when you have to start your fast, the first prayer, and finish your fast at the last prayer?
Yeah, you start. So you can't eat when the first prayer starts, and then it's the second last prayer, the one just after sunset.
Oh, sunset, right? Okay.
So just after sunset, so you've still got a glow on the sky just after sunset, and then the last one is when that glow completely disappears, and then you can see the stars, and it's completely dark.
Right.
At the moment, on a technicality, really we should not have a last prayer because we're in the twilight period now. It isn't completely dark in the sky.
Ah, right.
So if you use the traditional way they used to pray, is when you can see the stars and it's completely pitch black outside, and you won't get that in May, June, July and August, up until the 15th, I think, of August, roughly.
So would that would technically make Ramadan harder in places like Scotland than in, I don't know, Egypt, Pakistan or whatever, because they've got a certain thing all the way through the year, you know.
Yeah, well, it would mean here that we just don't pray the last prayer because the sky is there's still light. So what we do is we'll compare the last prayer to the previous month when it was completely dark. So you've got the second last, and then you've got the last one, right? And you go to the previous month and see what was the gap between those two. So if it was an hour or an hour and a half, you just apply. You do the second last prayer after sunset, and then you apply an hour and a half, and then you just do the last prayer, even though there is still light. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So you said that there's a prayer at 1:30. Like, how do you deal with that? Here?
That's in the afternoon. The 1:30.
Is it no about 1:30 now?
Yeah, well, there's another Imam, yeah.
All right.
There's another Imam at the mosque at the moment, yeah.
So,
Right.
well spotted.
No,
That's why you're doing the podcast, and we're just.
Yeah. No, arrange that.
The thing as well is though so Ramadan is not always in the summer because it moves every year. It moves forward, doesn't it?
It moves back.
Or backwards, right? Okay.
It moves back. I don't know exactly how that is, but it's because we follow the lunar calendar. So after a year, 10 days are lost. Because our month could be 29 or 30 days. We don't have 31 days. So what we'll do is on the 29th day, we'll look for the new crescent. If we don't see it, we'll complete 30 days. If we see it, we'll start the new month. And because of that, Ramadan then goes back 10 days every year. So at the moment we're in the summer. I remember the fast were in the winter about 15 years ago.
Right.
So we've got another 15 or 20 years when it'll go back to February, and that's when the fast will be really easy.
Is there an official thing? Is it like an official person that does this? Like finds the sort of areas that you have to do all this stuff, or do you do it for your own mosque? Or?
We do it for our own mosque.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought there was like a leader somewhere that like sort of goes through that.
No, we don't have a central body or anything. Right. I mean, we've got a central theological body, so if you compare to Christianity, like Catholics and Protestants, right. But even within those groups, each mosque just does its own. There's so much difference, it's unbelievable.
Is that even down to when Ramadan starts and ends?
Yeah.
Would it be possible technically that you'd have a difference between your mosque and Dunfermline Mosque or something?
Yeah, we will.
Wow.
Well, in Fife, Kirkcaldy and Dunfermline, we're kind of together, so we'll follow the same source in Ramadan. But everybody has their own idea. In Glasgow, what they've done now is that they ask the observatory, and they base it on calculation. So in Glasgow, they've set the date for Eid, which is the 15th of June. And technically, we're supposed to celebrate it when we see the new moon of the next month. Right. But they've just chosen that new way. And that's with every single issue within the religion. You can't point Islam to one thing now. There's so many different versions of it.
That seems super confusing.
It is.
To know astronomy.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Arabic.
Yeah.
So we get into the religious.
I think we could, aye.
Yeah.
You got everything on the top of your head? I think it.
Not on the top of my head, no, I've got it on my phone though.
That's cool, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because I'm
You had your phone at the
modern.
ready.
I've actually got a bit of paper if you
Have
want.
you got it on the
Yeah.
phone? See there, I'm ready to use a back.
Old people, man. See? So the old bull and the young bull story, which we can't tell in this podcast because it's too rude.
So it was kind of setting up this podcast. It was half your idea, was it not, to do this?
Yes, it was.
Because I think Bill came up and said to me, he said, I've got an Imam, pal, right? And he wants to do a podcast, he wants to touch on these topics that people keep talking about, and he needs a chance to sort of clearly and properly talk about them and get them out in the open and sort of get rid of it. So that was your idea?
Yeah.
Right. So, just in case I look like I'm starting trouble, we'll just start from the top then.
Yeah, I think it'll just be me who'll get in trouble for the answering them. So, but it's alright, I still will.
I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Yeah.
Right, so we'll start off with stoning for adultery. This is a problem that you see in places like Saudi Arabia and things like that.
Yep.
What's the take from you?
Right, it does exist within the religion. So initially the punishment for adultery was that you'll get stoned to death, which and it was probably the harshest way to punish someone. When the punishment was revealed to the Prophet, he didn't speak out against it, but the way he behaved towards it showed that he wasn't with the punishment. But because our belief is that we believe in one God who made everything, who controls everything, who brought you into existence, who can take you out, and He's the one who's put down the law, you don't have a choice, and you have to do as He says, if you like it or not. So there was one incident where there was a person who committed adultery at the time of the Prophet, and he came to him and he confessed. Because his belief was that if I get punished now, I won't get punished in the next life, which is burning in the fire of hell. So he thought, I'd rather get stoned now. So he said to the Prophet that I've committed adultery, give me the capital punishment. And the narration says that the Prophet ignored him, like he didn't say anything. And then he turned around, he ignored him, and he went to the other side and says, I've committed adultery, punish me. And he ignored him again, turned the other way, and he did the same thing. And the Prophet ignored him again, and this happened 4 times. And after the 4th time, he says to him that, are you sure that you committed adultery? And he said, yes, I'm sure. He said that, are you sure you didn't dream it? Are you sure you didn't have a dream when you woke up in the morning and you thought you really did something? He said, no, I actually committed adultery. And then he ordered them to get that person stoned. So what happened was they started the punishment, and the person decided, well, I can't take this, and he ran away. and the people that were carrying the punishment out, they chased him, and they eventually killed him. And when the news came back to the Prophet, the narration says that he was quite angry that they did that. And he says to them that, well, why didn't you let him go? Maybe God would have forgiven him. So when commentators speak on that, they say that, well, the Prophet was really against the punishment, so it was an indication to other imams that if it does happen, try to ignore it. Find excuses not to carry out the punishment.
So this reminds me a bit of the Jesus story. Is that what you were going to bring up as well?
There's also something that I've only just realised after about 20 years of studying this stuff, and I'm going to tell you in a minute. But yeah, the Jesus story. Oh, the Jesus story. I thought you were going to tell the Jesus story.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because everybody knows the story in the Bible about the woman caught in adultery. Now, in the Old Testament, in Leviticus, it says that if a man commits adultery with a woman, then both the man and the woman should be stoned to death.
Yep.
It's very simple, get stoned to death, because you're not allowed. And all the way through the Old Testament, God hates divorce, God hates adultery, because it's like a metaphor for people. It's a metaphor for apostasy, for abandoning your faith, or being untrue to your faith, right? So the rabbis, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious leaders of the time in Jesus, they didn't like Jesus at all, and they were always trying to trip him up, because Jesus was walking around doing charitable interpretations of scriptures, like what you just described as the prophet. So they found this woman, and they dragged her before him and said, "We've got her. We caught her committing adultery. Bang to rights. What should we do?" And they thought that they'll get two birds with one stone. They'll get a stoning, and they'll also be able to catch out Jesus. And Jesus said the famous line that everyone knows, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." He didn't say he can stone her, he didn't say he couldn't stone her. He says that anyone who is unsinned, who's not sinned, you cast the first stone. And then she ended up not getting sinned. But the thing that I did realise when you were telling that story was that the law is not only stone the woman, the law is stone both parties. And I just realised in that story with Jesus, after 20, 30 years of reading this, that they only dragged the woman in front of Jesus. They never dragged the man in front. They should, by rights, they should have been both of them, and they said, "We caught her in adultery." So that's by the by. So just as a wee aside, in Islam, is a punishment apply to the woman or to the woman and the man?
It applies to both of them.
Right.
But sadly, you'll hear of stories like in Iran and in Saudi Arabia where only the woman is getting punished. And sometimes it's really bad where a woman will come and report a rape against her, and she'll get stoned for it. They'll say that, well, you committed adultery.
That's where the right wingers like to jump in at that point, because it's an easy story to attack. So I think that's problematic.
But it's not the only punishment there. I'm more on the liberal views on this, and there'll be most of the imams will disagree with me on this. But the university that I studied from, the main imam he's passed away now, and he's considered as the greatest scholar of that university, and he was an expert in Islamic law. And he says that the verses that talk about stoning, they were abrogated because originally they were verses in the Quran which spoke about stoning the adulterer, stoning both parties, but those verses were removed from the book when the final version was set. So he's of the opinion that stoning is not stipulated; it's up to the judge. They should be punished. There is a punishment, but it's not stoning.
That's. I was going to bring that up, but I didn't, because I didn't think it was relevant. But I have had conversations with Muslims who have pointed out that now there is no mention of stoning in Islamic texts.
There's not.
I think they're referencing the Quran. I don't know if it's in the Hadith or.
It's in the Hadith. Well, the narration that I told you where he turned around, the Prophet turned around, that's from the Hadith, so
right.
it did take place, but the answer to that is that happened before those verses in the Quran were abrogated.
Right.
So you don't need to apply that anymore. And again, I mean, still, people think that it's really harsh. Why do they have to be punished for? It's just that at that time, adultery was considered as the biggest insult to a man if somebody was to sleep with his wife. Nowadays, we're much more open and much more liberal. They were very conservative at that time. They didn't like showing their wives to other people. So because of that, it was a male-driven society at that time. So to do that to somebody's woman will degrade them to the lowest point. So that's why. Well, man didn't stipulate that. We believe that God is the one who stipulated that. But nowadays, if there was an Islamic state, I'm sure that they should now. They have to stipulate a punishment, right? But it should be according to what the time is. So now we're more to prison sentences, community service, things like that, and I think we can leave behind the stoning and the flogging.
So here's a hypothetical question.
Yeah.
So we're saying that God brought in these rules.
Yep.
Back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason why He hasn't sort of upgraded or
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it. Updated the rules to coincide with how we're viewing things today?
I think it's up to the scholars to do the updating now.
Right.
So we believe in all the prophets sent by God. Right, so we believe in Christianity, Judaism, and the religions that came before that. But our belief is that when a new prophet comes, you need to follow the new religion. So when Moses came and went, the Jews carried on following Moses until Jesus came. Now they have to leave Judaism and they have to follow the new prophet sent by the same God. So our belief is that, well, then God sent the next prophet, Muhammad. So everybody now has to follow this prophet who was sent by the same God that sent Jesus. So when we believe that the Prophet Muhammad was the last one, and it's only a prophet who can come later on and then update a religion and say, well, that was what they used to follow, we need to follow this now. Because he was the last one, who can do it now, who can update the religion? It's the scholars that do it. And they should be doing that. So they should look at how time changes and how people change, and you're allowed to mold the religion into that. That's why you'll always get this reply by Muslim where they'll say that, well, that was his interpretation of the text. That was his interpretation. The text, we believe, has been made ambiguous deliberately, just so that when time changes, you can look at it and say, well, do you know what? I can take this meaning out of it now, and that'll be more suited to me living in this place or living in this time. So the scholars should be doing that. You will get a lot of them that do stick to the literal word and say, well, the way it was revealed, that's what we're going to follow. But I don't see any wisdom in that. I see that as a person being very narrow-minded.
Yeah.
If he's not going to look at the bigger picture, because the religion is there to cater for the people, and if it's not catering for the people, then what's the point? What's the point of it?
Totally agree. In the sort of atheist community type thing, this is where I fell out with a lot of atheists.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be of the view that was picking and choosing, and that's not following. They're sort of essentially taking the view of conservative Muslims in that regard. Whereas I personally, as a lefty snowflake person, right, I take the view that I don't care if you're choosing and picking things out that more appeal to you, as long as you're going in the same direction as everybody else.
Yeah.
And you seem to be of the more left wing persuasion.
Yeah.
You seem to be at least be more liberal against death penalty and things like that.
Yeah.
So for me, I totally agree with you. I'm totally in support of what you do.
Yeah.
I've not really got an issue with it.
Yeah.
But just to cover all the bases,
Yeah.
I guess we'll just carry on.
Yeah,
See-
no, but
see what else comes up.
it was important to cover that, because whenever anybody's asked that on TV or the radio, they do go quiet, and they're kind of scared to challenge it, because it's from the Quran, and we're not allowed to challenge anything
Right.
from the Quran. Thankfully my degree in Cairo was on interpretation of the text, so I know that I can interpret whatever verse I need to for a given situation.
It's worth saying as well. I mean, just to compare with Christianity and the Bible, all the stuff like the things that you can get put to death for in the Bible. I've never read the Quran, but you could get put to death in the Bible for being rude to your parents.
Oh yeah.
You get put to death for being rude to your parents. If you're not a virgin when you get married, if you're a woman, you get put to death. You get stoned to death. And every time that death is mentioned, it's always by stoning. So we've got the same conundrum with Christianity and so forth. Judaism's in a special place with us, but Christianity has got 2 get-out clauses. Christianity says all that stuff's there, that was Old Testament. When Jesus came along, that all went away, and we've only got these 2 rules about love God and love your neighbour. Then there's a second get-out clause as well, because actually there's a whole bunch of stuff even in the New Testament after Jesus came along that's impossible to live up to. So in like the New Testament, for example, even if you say, well, Bill, that's in the Old Testament, New Testament's different stuff. It says in the New Testament, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cause it to sin. If you look at a woman or someone you're attracted to, whether it's a boy or a girl, you look at someone, lust after them, they're not your wife, that's a sin. So you need to pluck out your eyes. If you don't, you're going to hell. If you maybe do something, I don't know, steal something or have sex, or your hand is involved, your hand commits a sin, cut it off, or you're going to go to hell. When you die, you're going to go to hell. If you're rich when you die, you're going to go to hell. There's a lot of people in the New Testament that are going to die when they go to hell, right? In fact, everybody is going to go to hell when they die from the Old Testament. Because also it says if your hand, your eye causes you to sin, a few pages later on, it says everyone sins. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But you have to cut off and pluck off the bits of your body that make you sin. So you're caught in a catch-22. Everybody sins. If you do sin, cut off the bit of your body that makes you sin. Now, when you go down to church, your local minister, the chap you had up here, I don't know if he was a quadruple amputee and completely blind and plucked his eyes out. But in order to go to heaven, according to his book, he'll need to do that, because if he doesn't, he's going to hell. Same as me, same as you. We'll meet up there, you know? The second get-out clause comes later on with a guy called Paul. Later on, after Jesus dies, goes to heaven, this guy Paul comes along, again, one of the prophets. He says a really clever thing. It's like the story about the woman in adultery. He says, brothers, if any of your brothers or sisters are caught in a sin, those of you who are spiritual should counsel him in a spirit of gentleness. Brilliant. So if the 3 of us here are Christians and I do something bad against the Bible, then it's you 2 have got the responsibility to tell me about it. But only if you're spiritual. See? So then you got to say, who's spiritual? Who's spiritual? Like, who really, I'm like really spiritual, love God. What it means is that's my get-out clause or your get-out clause, because you don't feel that you're godly enough, spiritual enough to actually tell me. So therefore I get to, this whole behaviour goes unchallenged. So it's interesting the difference in the way that you've got these really, what would appear to be really harsh punishments in the Quran. We've got really harsh punishments in the Bible. And the 2 different ways of how each religion reconciles that, so that we don't actually go around, in this country anyway, chopping people's hands off and throwing bowls at them.
Could you imagine a world where the punishment was still carried out if you were mean to your parents?
Oh, absolutely. That's amazing.
There's instant genocide at that point.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, let's see quickly if I can find it before I read it out, because it's absolutely remarkable what it says here. In fact, you have to get dragged before. In fact, I won't bother.
You've done way more research than me, and I'm the host in the podcast.
But not as much research as this man, so it's good. If someone has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother and will not listen to them when they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of the town. They will say to the elders, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious, he will not obey us, he is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his town are to stone him to death. You must purge evil from among you. All Israel will hear of it and be afraid. That's just for being rude to your parents.
Is there no one where there was bairns that were ripped apart by bears?
Yes, that was. It was. I always get mixed up with Elijah and Elisha, and the sin was Elijah or Elisha. They were both in the Bible. I can't remember which one it was. And he's walking through the forest, and some local kids. He was a bald guy, so they pointed at him and they said the words in the New International Version of the Bible is go up, Baldy. It's like, on yourself, Baldy. And then two she bears come out of the forest and rip them to shreds, rip these children to shreds for insulting the prophet of God. So yeah, so when we hear
They're really sensitive.
we've been having a bit of a debate online, Craig and me and some other people, about white privilege and cultural sensitivity, and we're talking about, for example, Charlie Hebdo drawing a cartoon of the prophet, which is deeply upsetting and insulting to Islam, to Muslims, and sort of saying, look, you know, we wouldn't care if someone drew a cartoon of Jesus. In fact, people do. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's okay to draw a cartoon of the prophet. Well, there you go. If you're back in the old days, you get ripped apart by bears for that sort of nonsense. Yeah. So, you know, watch your step. So it's not only Islam that cares deeply about its prophets. Yeah. Clearly, the Bible was a bit kind of strict on that sort of thing as well, you know.
But then, I mean, it doesn't. Also, the point, it doesn't give that person the right to then come and kill him.
No, of course.
That to be mentioned, because some people might think that they care about their prophet. Let's not say anything, or else they might kill us. It doesn't give them.
But there needs to be some sort of. I forgot the word, but there needs to be some where sort of meet in the middle. Yeah. Go right. I'll just not be a dick and say this.
Yeah.
If you stop killing people.
Sure.
That should be that's a fair. In my view, that's a fair way to. You stop being a dick. You stop killing people. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, and if it happens, or if you are insulted, you can't really do anything about it, because the person that's doing it is not Muslim, and he's not living under a Sharia state. So you have to look at reality. So you will get these things happening. And not everybody's going to conform to your rules, you know, but everybody has a way that they live. They have different sensitivities, and you have to understand that. But yeah, if everybody was respectful to each other, that would have been the ideal world. But it's not like that. So I think we have to learn how to deal with that. Now. Well, just quickly on that, why do they do that? Blasphemy within the religion is a big sin. So if it was an Islamic state, again, if I was to commit blasphemy in a Sharia state, nobody's allowed to come and kill me on the street. So what would happen is that I would be arrested, and then I would be tried, and then I would be given a chance to defend myself, and then there's some imams that say that the person receives the death penalty, and there's others that would maybe give a prison sentence or something.
So would this be included in a apostasy?
Yeah.
So my question is, do atheists come under apostates, even if they weren't previously in Islam? Do they still consider to be?
No. Apostasy will be those who were Muslim first and then left the religion.
Right. Is there much about atheists? I mean, there wasn't really that thing back then, so I can't imagine that thing.
Not at the beginning of Islam, because at that time the fight was against idol worship and worshipping a god. A true God. So it was the Prophet Muhammad said that, well, we've got one God, and the rest of them were like, well, no, these statues are the gods that we worship. But then later on, there are stories of scholars in the past that would debate atheists. So, and this is from scholars that were around 12, 1300 years, not long after the Prophet Muhammad passed away. So that it did exist at the time. But Islam's always of the view that whichever ideology you're with, you've got the right to follow that. So and that's seen in with Israel and Palestine now. The situation's got really bad. But in the past, when the Muslims were in control, Jews and Christians were allowed to practice their faith. However they wanted.
I've had this conversation with people before where they've assumed that. It's always been the same, but no, like peacefully.
Yeah, only thing is there was a tax that non-Muslims needed to pay. But it was a tax or protection.
Right.
But not how it's explained. It's sometimes explained, that you paid the tax to show that you're lower than everybody else. It was just that faith. People of faith were given preference, so they were given protection for free because they were Muslim.
Right.
And then the Christians and the rest of whichever religion you followed, you had to pay for that protection. but you were allowed to practice your religion quite freely. There's a really famous story of one of the caliphs, the second caliph, when he came into Jerusalem, and he arrived, and there was, I think it was a church where the priest asked him to come and pray inside the church just for the honour of it, and the caliph told him that, well, I would, but I know that if I did, later on the Muslims will knock down the church and they'll build a mosque after I die, just to honour me because I prayed in there. So he prayed outside, just for the protection of that. And you've got many other examples where within the past where caliphs allowed leaders allowed people of different religions to practice their religion freely, quite freely.
Just 2 days ago was the 70th anniversary of what the Palestinians call the Nakba, the catastrophe, which was the creation of the State of Israel.
Yeah.
So the State of Israel is 70 years and 2 days old today. So there's been a lot of stuff. There was a big event in Edinburgh that I was at a couple of days ago, and we were hearing stories. Obviously, as time goes by, there's fewer and fewer people who were actually alive at that time, because time goes by. But you hear stories about coexistence where, for example, you'd have a Palestinian family might have a Jewish nanny, and they'll quite happily entrust the children to the Jewish nanny to look after their kids when they went out to play, or vice versa. The same as you might have here in Fife. You might have someone from a different culture looking after your kids, or you would a teacher in an indigenously white country, as a Muslim. So that was a situation. It was a case of there was all these different cultures. Druze, Jews, Christians, Muslims, Samaritans, all these guys. And it was a multicultural society, pretty much what like Fife is today. The reason that Palestine and Israel came into conflict is nothing to do with, according to all the history that I've read, it's nothing to do with religion. It's to do with the fact that the United Nations at that time took a country and designated part of that country that belonged to someone else and imposed millions of people from all over the world to go and live in Palestine. And then there was ethnic cleansing. In one day, 750,000 people driven out of the houses on gunshot. And the way they did it was on a concatenation effect, a domino effect. So the Haganah, the Irgun, the Stern Gang, all the Jewish terrorists gangs, which are history, you can look it up on Google, nobody's going to dispute that these were Jewish terrorist gangs, they would do exactly what Islamic State is doing today. They'll go into one village and commit such atrocities that the people in the next village would flee for their lives and run away. The story that we hear and the slogan that we hear about the State of Israel is a land without people for a people without land. Sounds like a perfect solution. It's a complete lie. It's a complete lie. There was no such place as Palestine before we went there. In Arabic, and Mansoor will back me up here, there is no letter P. You can ask for a pizza or a pizza, but you can't ask for a pizza. In Arabic, it's pizza. Okay? So Palestine, in Arabic, is Palestine. Palestini is a Palestinian. The Palestini, in here, when people say there's no such thing as Palestine, the Philistines are all over the Old Testament. Never mind they were there before 1948. They're documented going back 6,000 years. And Samson, this big guy with all his strength and everything, he used to slay Philistines for fun. And that was Palestinians. So the Palestinians have been there for thousands and thousands of years. And then the Balfour Declaration created it, basically took the map and said, right, well, here's a country here, this whole tabletop here, and we're just going to impose this bit here. That's where the Jewish state is going to be. So they could have been Jewish people, they could have been Christian people, they could have been people from Mars. What's going to happen if you've got terrorism and ethnic cleansing and people getting murdered left, right and centre, and you start imposing that on someone else's land? You're going to come into conflict. And it's absolutely nothing to do with Jews and Muslims. Also worth noting that 10% at least of Palestinians are actually Christians, who are equally opposed to the Zionist state. So just on that, just for clarity there, I'm perhaps in a stronger position to be able to say so I don't sound like a Muslim fundamentalist, and I can speak as strongly as I like without getting in trouble about that. There we go. So
here's a question that we didn't discuss before. Yep. So you've not researched this, so I apologise for springing this on you. But there was a video. It's no serious. There was a video on BuzzFeed of a rabbi. Christian and an atheist.
An Orthodox Jew.
Unorthodox rabbi.
Rabbi, sorry, aye. And, atheist.
A minister, was it a priest or was it a minister?
It's a bit vague, guys. Anyway,
There was three different, two religions and an atheist, right? And they were smoking weed.
Right.
And they were talking about weed in the Bible and the Torah and stuff like that.
Alright.
Is there any precedent for weed in Islam?
Not at all. It's considered as an intoxicant.
Right.
So at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, it was wine mostly, and they described it as an intoxicant. So what the scholars did was they just did a comparison between that and wine, and they don't allow it.
Right.
They don't. I don't think there is a single imam that I can find that that does. I don't even think they allow it for medicinal purposes.
Right.
Not if you were to smoke. I don't think you smoke it for medicinal purposes. I think it's the oil that's used.
It's the oil.
So they're a bit wary on that. Somebody actually asked me this a few days ago. Can we use the oil, cannabis oil? And I said it was fine, and he kind of frowned. He expected me to say no.
I think technically, if you're going to use the hemp oil, I think that would be alright because it's no an intoxicant. So
it's not got THC in it.
It's not got THC,
Yeah.
so wouldn't it be an intoxicant? So
Yeah, but I mean, say even if it was intoxicating and you were really ill, I would say you would be allowed to use it. I think I was reading on the net where it was a video I watched on Facebook of this young lad who would experience severe stomach pains, and he described them as like 100 razors being thrown into his stomach, and he was given all sorts of medicine and nothing worked, and then he tried the hemp oil. It wasn't intoxicating, but that fixed the problem. But if a person was in a situation where, say, if he had to, hypothetically, if he had to smoke it to take the pain away, it would be fine. If it was excruciating pain, then yeah.
No.
Then yeah, but generally, no. You can't have any spliffs, no.
It's the same in the Bible, obviously. Cannabis must have been around, right? Because, it's a plant, it didn't just get invented. But it's not mentioned anywhere in the Bible. It's wine, like you say.
Yeah.
It's not actually explicitly prohibited in the Bible, only drunkenness is.
Yeah.
But there's no mention of intoxicating drugs, even though they were there, which is interesting. So, but nevertheless, if you fast forward now and you get a minister in here that would say, we would kind of be even more strongly against drugs than we are against alcohol because it's an intoxicant. But they would have to then make that logical leap themselves, the same as you guys have to, because it's not actually mentioned. Yeah. And it's really weird because it must have existed, so that's odd.
The rabbi did say that there was some plant or herb mentioned. It obviously wasn't called cannabis.
Sure.
He said that there was something that gave certain effects that makes him assume that it was cannabis.
Okay.
But he was stoned at the time, so...
I'll look into that.
it's judgment.
So there was no reason for me to bring that up, but
That's good.
it sort of breaks up the seriousness.
So what about another one, right? So again, this has not been rehearsed or discussed. I discussed this with a guy from another mosque, a chairman, and it's about pig valves in heart surgery. So, it could save a person's life that they actually do. Like in modern medicine, sometimes if you need a new valve for your heart, they've got synthetic ones, but sometimes it's better that they use a valve from a pig. And what this guy said, he's on the committee of the mosque I was talking to. He said, well, look, it's saving the person's life. We would allow it. Yeah. I wonder that there might be varied opinion about that, depending who you spoke to. Do you think?
Yeah, there will be. I did a presentation on organ donation. I was in Cambridge for a year. It's in one of the colleges there, and I'm strongly of the opinion that you're allowed to donate organs, and there's many imams that don't allow it, just based on the fact that because God made your body and He owns it, and you're not allowed to change it. So they would be against. But that's actually a different question with yours.
That's good. That's one step further.
Yeah. It's a complex issue. I'll need a panel of legal experts. But
we can come back another time.
Just on the top of my head, I would be for it. I would say that's okay. But I would say that it should be kept as a last resort. So if there's nothing else, then we can use that. if they say that it's better, it'll need to be significantly better for you to use that rather than other material.
Yeah, plastic or something.
Yeah, but you will get people that will be strongly against that.
So, while we're on this topic,
Yeah.
can we quickly touch on the fact that bacon isn't
I was just
actually
going to ask this.
isn't actually kryptonite to Muslims?
It's like when when a Muslim touches a bit of bacon, their hand goes on fire or something.
Well, I
Like
was just going to actually say that because there was a situation in Dunfermline.
Aye.
So and I said, well, why are you reacting so strongly for? Just pick it up and chuck it in the bin. You're not going to die.
The thing that brought me into this topic, the first time I heard about this was there was meant to be a mosque getting built in somewhere in England, and so
we talked about the podcast.
one of these right-wing mutant groups decided, we'll get a packet of bacon and we'll bury it under the place, and then that means they can't build the mosque.
Like the ancient burial ground type idea.
And then what actually happened is one of the Muslims that went to them just picked it up and put it in the bin. That was the end, and then they just built the mosque.
Yeah.
What is it? What exactly? Let's explain for the right-wing Neanderthals, right? What exactly can Muslims not do with bacon?
They can't eat it.
Yeah.
End of list.
So you can't pick them up off a fence with your mouth or anything like that. I'm assuming that's right.
No,
That makes sense.
Well, right. I'm going to take a third view here, right?
Yeah.
Because I was involved in that, and it was Sid Akbar who reported to the press.
Yes.
And I'm pals with Sid. He's on the committee of the Dunfermline Mosque. So I was saying to him, right, I took a different attitude. I said, no, this is completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
And it's another way to look at it is a few years previously, back the way, the other mosque in Kirkcaldy, in St Mary's Terrace, had some graffiti sprayed on it, and it was it was Islamophobic graffiti. I think it was something really mental about Christ is going to come or something. It was just garbage. But the point it was illiterate. It was illogical.
That was the first thing you said. The smell rack.
And it didn't really make an awful lot of sense.
Yeah.
But the point is, right? The point is, it's a case of right now you're at a crossroads. You've got sliding doors. You can go this way and go that way. And I was a director of Free Fife, the Racial Equalities Charity at that time. So I'm speaking to the guys and saying, you know what, here guys, zero tolerance. Imagine if that was a synagogue, right? Imagine if someone went and wrote stuff like that in a synagogue. It would be equally offensive to Jewish people as it is to Muslim, whatever the guy wrote, But Christ is coming to get you or something, right? That would offend a Jew and a Muslim the same. And I'm saying, no, this is a thin end of the wedge. And the guys at the mosque going, well, Bill, you know what? If we just paint over it, right, we'll have a quiet word with the police, and we don't want to put head above the parapet. That was the words that they used.
Yeah.
Because that'll encourage more. And what I said to them, I'm not saying I was right? I'm saying this is my argument. I said it's the bully in the playground. The bully in the playground wants 50 pence off you. So you give him 50 pence. The next day he wants 50 pence, you give him 50 pence. Do you think if you give the bully £1, that's going to make him go away? He's going to want £1 now, or £2. He's going to keep coming back. And it'll start off with a thin end of the wedge, but before you know it, this guy's going to be dominating your life until you do something about it. Beat him up, get your brother to beat him up, report him to the police, report him to do something, right? Don't just keep giving this guy 50 pence. Well, in the result, what they did was, to be fair, I was proved wrong, because what they did was a quiet word, the police had painted over it, and to be fair, it did go away, right? It didn't happen again. But imagine if that was a synagogue, what the synagogue would have done. And the synagogue would have been absolutely right. They would have raised heaven and hell. They'd have wanted police patrols and helicopters and SAS. And listen, they'd be absolutely right. Because if you give them an inch, you give these right-wing Neanderthal thugs, as you describe them, an inch, they will take them. So, it was actually Sid, my mate Sid, who actually picked up the bacon and put it in the bucket. But you see, it's like the thing about drawing a cartoon of the Prophet that we said. You could draw a cartoon of me, right? In fact, you go on holiday and you give someone 10 quid to draw a cartoon of you. The payment artist, right? Draw a picture of me if you want. Draw a picture of Jesus if you want. I don't care. Draw a picture of God if you want. You draw a picture of God, and for a Jew or a Muslim, that's highly offensive. You draw a picture of Muhammad, it's highly offensive. It's about equality. And the example that I gave on Facebook the other day was, look, equality does not mean treating everybody the same. Just because you're not offended doesn't mean he's not offended. Because it doesn't offend you doesn't mean it's okay for him. If you're both in my classroom and you're blind and he's sighted and I give you the same book, not Braille, then you're disadvantaged. Yeah. If he's sighted and I give him a Braille book, he can't use it, right? If you need a wheelchair to get around and I hold a meeting and I've got up on the first floor and there's no lift, the people in a wheelchair are getting treated exactly the same as the people not in a wheelchair, right? But they're disadvantaged. So the fact that it's the intent behind, to my mind, it's the intent behind coming along with that piece of bacon. I actually never got into it with Sarah. They've not got like CCTV, and I just get CCTV and get this guy and prosecute him and send him to prison. And then we'll see it's funny, because that's a hate crime. So you can say, oh, logically and philosophically, I'm going to reduce that to nothing more than a simple prank. Well, that's a simple prank, pal, that will lead you to go into prison. So you can have lots of time for your belly laugh and your chortling when you're in Stockton. There you go. That's my attitude to it. But maybe I'm overreacting. I'm not even a Muslim.
Yeah. You agree or disagree?
What do you think? Mansoor?
I wouldn't go. I'm not that intense. I'm a bit relaxed. I'll just like pick up and throw away.
See,
you're right in a sense though that is the kind of bill in the green
What would you do? Would you like speak to the police? Would you just throw it in the bucket, wash your hands, and that's it? Or what would you?
No, I would report it. But I wouldn't highlight that I'll be afraid of bacon. I think that's what people are looking at.
Maybe
I would, so they think, oh, let's chuck bacon on them.
That's the worst that happens.
Because then if you laugh at them and say it's just bacon, I'm not going to. It's bacon, but they might up the ante. Whereas if you go, oh bacon, oh, they might just stick to bacon, and then you just be like.
I can't actually see both sides of the argument. It's just my natural response is to say, no, I'm not.
I took kind of the same thing, because I had to send a press release to the Dunfermline Post or whatever.
Oh, good man.
So
did they print it?
Probably not.
Alright, okay.
They never do.
Because I sent them out and printed either. You should have gone online, man, done it online. Anyway, carry on.
And I took the view of, as I say, it's not kryptonite, it's not, no one's hurt, but the intent behind it needs to be squashed.
So you did that as in your capacity as your press secretary of Solidarity, your social
Solidarity.
Oh, that's nice, yeah. There you go. Solidarity's got your back, man.
Yeah.
Even though you don't need it.
Because it's very easy to pick up bacon.
But I mean, did they check who it was? I looked juvenile to me. I thought it might be kids that did it.
It could have been
just one slice.
It could have been a kid. When I was,
how many strips was it?
When I was a little boy, right? I was a right little shit. I was a horrible little boy. A horrible little boy. I was racist. I was homophobic, and I grew even as a young man. It was only later on that I grew some sense.
Yep.
But some of the things I did when I was a little boy that were really hurtful. They were like hateful stuff that I did, and I was told at the time. Right, I was told at the time in uncertain terms. That's what's going to mould you later on, right? That you learn. If you just let everybody off with everything and don't, even if you explain to them what the problem is, they say, I don't care because I effing hate effing Muslims. They say, okay, right, but I've explained it to you. I don't care. Well, in that case, I'll do it there because I don't like Muslims. Well, okay, that's a risk to take. But if you don't explain to these kids, they're going to grow up thinking that kind of behaviour is perfect. It's not. It's about mutual respect. So in the same way they're going, we don't want Sharia law in this country. We don't want to be subjected to bad Islamic laws. I say, well, yeah, what you want is you want the Muslims, if they ever get in the majority, to respect you. You want them to allow you to have your butt fast and your cigarettes and your porn and whatever else is legal. What you want, guess what you're asking for? You're asking for tolerance from your Muslim neighbours towards you. Well, guess what? Stop putting effing bacon on mosque door handles and show tolerance to them, because guess what? If it time ever does come, you've got 5% Muslim population in Britain right now, but you never know. You never know. If the time ever does come,
scared people.
What you're going to be looking for from Muslims is you're going to be looking for tolerance. So guess what? You show tolerance right now and respect.
I think Bill's the one establishing a caliphate at this point.
I think he is.
Absolutely. It'd be some universe if I was in
I had a
church.
stupid thought in my mind there. What about vegan bacon? Because there's a slight intent there.
That's a good point.
If you were a vegan Nazi and you wanted to insult Muslims,
There's a slight intent there because it is in some way.
It's called bacon.
It's called bacon.
But there's no actual bacon there.
Like, it's kind of less offensive. In
and
that
turkey
sense.
bacon, that'd be like on a sliding
bacon as
scale.
well.
Do you like turkey?
Yeah.
Turkey bacon.
Turkey.
There you go.
So if they put turkey bacon on it, you're just like, oh, lunch.
Well,
Well, not if it's been sitting on a fence.
I know.
Right. Lunch I'm not going to eat. But you can get the tab bits.
Well, here's the thing. By the way,
I love how this has been the most intense.
over and above all my excitable stuff, I actually did research on it, because I sent a press release in to them just on my own behalf. I am my own political party, and I said I've researched this. There was a guy, and that happened more than once. A guy that got 12 months in prison for leaving a bacon roll outside the door of a mosque. 12 months in prison. Google it, guys. And actually, whenever this has happened previously in a mosque or a synagogue, the standard sentence is 12 months. I think there's one in Dundee as well, close at home. People putting bacon near mosque, you can go to prison for a year. So you could debate about whether it matters or whether it doesn't matter, and that's what I was saying earlier on there about Stockton. The law says 12 months, mate. You know?
What kind of dickhead just goes, first of all, makes a bacon roll to put in front of a mosque?
Oh.
That's way too much effort to be a prick for me. That seems like a waste of time. I don't understand how anybody could be sad enough to think that that's going to... Do they think they're making a political point? Is that what they think they're doing? Do they think, oh, well, if I do this, then we're going to get rid of all the Muslims and we're going to be safe? Is that what they think?
Just this slice of bacon.
Just this one bacon roll.
Well, see, you look at Kristallnacht, you look at the rise of Nazism in Germany in the 1930s. Now it all started off, and all the little subtle bits of propaganda. In order to have something like Nazism happen, you need to make people do two things. It's not enough to make the people hate the Jews. The Nazis, it wasn't enough for the Nazis to make the ordinary Germans hate the Jews. They had to make them fear them as well. When you hate something and you fear something, then that's it. Now you think about it. If a little puppy came in here from next door, oh, a little puppy, I better take it next door, give it back. A little kitten comes in, oh, look at the little kitten. A butterfly, no problem. A sewer rat or a cockroach comes in here, that's different. Why? Because if you're sensible, you hate it and you fear it. And you wouldn't think about stamping on a puppy. You wouldn't think about stamping on a butterfly. What kind of cretin would do something like that? But I would quite happily stamp on a cockroach and give me a poker or a nice heavy stick and I'll whack the brains out of the sewer rat comes into my house. Why? Because I hate it and fear it. Right?
You're a psychopath.
Hate it and fear it, man. You want rats in your house? You got rats in this house? Man, I'm just looking around. You know. So it's the difference, right? So this is what Hitler and Goebbels did. They had all these, you've seen all these horrible anti-Semitic posters that they used to have, you know, the caricatures of Jews and making them out to be. But it starts off this thin end of the wedge, and before you know it, you've got Kristallnacht, before you know it, you've got Muslim storefronts getting smashed in exactly the same as they did with the Nazis and so forth. So we should learn from that, right? This has already happened. Like, not in my lifetime, because I'm young and vibrant. This has happened. Like, I was going to say even this century, in the 1930s, this has happened, and there's still people alive today that happened to. So we learn the lessons from that, and we'd have zero tolerance if we saw Nazism growing in this country against the Jews again. So we've seen that before. Well, if you just move it 10 degrees now, happening against Muslims, you say, wait a minute, that's the same thing. That's the same thing. Not having it.
Well, I've just been watching a bunch of series and documentaries on Hitler, and it is worrying just sort of how the same it is, how similar it is when you see hatred against Muslims, and then you see what he done to plan this thing against Jews. It's obviously not at the same peak yet, but it's the same starting position. It's scary, actually.
There you go, that's my point.
So, we went off topic quite a lot there.
As promised.
As promised, aye. Yeah. But it's a bit of fun. Should we wait until Stephen's in the camera before we start the next topic?
So just go.
We just go. So the next, it's homosexuality next.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of these are going to have the same answer.
Yeah.
But there's going to be some details that you could cover.
Yeah.
So homosexuality, do you want?
The misconception is that homosexuals.
You do me a favour and sit a wee bit closer to the mic.
Yeah.
Or start bellowing like me.
Aye.
The misconception is that homosexuals should be killed.
Right.
There is a narration on that. It's the words of the Prophet that the person that does it and the one that's done upon, both of them should be killed. So when I was doing my research on this, I realised that the narration is really weak, because every narration of the Prophet comes with a chain of narrators, and if there's a problem in the chain, we don't accept that narration.
Right.
So the the researchers that had done their commentaries on that, they mentioned 2 points. They said that firstly, the chain is weak, so we're not going to accept it, and secondly, that saying has only been narrated by one companion of the Prophet Muhammad. And they said that, well, that doesn't make sense, because if homosexuality is a big sin within the religion and it deserves capital punishment, then every single one of them should be going out and telling people, well, this is the punishment if you see this happening. Why is it that just one person has narrated the saying? So they don't accept it. at all. So there is no death penalty for homosexuality. That doesn't mean that it's allowed as a sin within the religion, but that's somebody's own choice. If they want to do that, then that's fine. That's up to them. It's God to judge. It's for God to judge them, and not me, and not any other imam.
Alright.
I've
got a feeling. Right, obviously I'm an atheist. We've spoken about this before, but my assumption is that God would probably have better things to do than to punish somebody for being homosexual. Yeah. That's my assumption. Mm-hmm. And we talked about what was it we were talking about? I can't remember. This was a while ago. We had this discussion, but you were talking about something that some imams would argue that you're not allowed to eat, but was it shellfish or was it?
Yeah.
That I said that God wouldn't mind too much. I would imagine.
Well,
is that what that was?
Well, yeah. Well, on shellfish, yeah. I don't think you'll mind on shellfish because the difference about bacon, yeah. I think you'll mind on that.
Right. I was just funny thing I popped in my head.
But just again, my comparison: homosexuality, Old Testament punishable by stoning to death, New Testament punishable by going to hell. So. There you go. Yeah. There you go.
Homosexuals get it tough, don't they?
Yeah. But I think the important thing is how we deal with it, because obviously some people don't believe in the hereafter. So if I say to you, well, a homosexual is going to go to hell in the next life, that won't mean anything to you because you don't believe in it. The important thing is how we deal with it now, and the point is that you can't. If a Muslim wants to be gay, that is up to him, and you can't do anything about it. And you shouldn't be condemning him, because he's doing it himself. And even though you believe it is a sin within the religion, because no punishment has been set, right? That tells you that you don't have a right to say anything to him, right? And if you believe in the hereafter, then God will judge him, right? And you've got nothing to do with that.
There was a gay imam in San Francisco, which probably won't shock anybody in San Francisco. So my assumption would be that he is of the belief that God wouldn't have an issue with it, or he's a Muslim that doesn't believe in an afterlife, or the hell.
There are certain imams that say that because we take the evidence from the story of Lot. And his people they were punished because of homosexuality, but you'll get certain imams that will say, well, he wasn't. They weren't punished because of that. It was something else.
This is Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah. And it'll be that is a minority, but the majority do say that the story is referring to homosexuality and it's a sin, and you're not allowed to do it. And then if somebody does, that's entirely up to them. But why is it any different than we're not allowed to drink alcohol, but you'll have so many Muslims that are drinking it. We're not allowed to sell it, but you've got so many Muslims that are selling it, but nobody says anything to them. But then they single out one sin for some reason.
I didn't think you weren't allowed to sell it. I thought it was just drinking it. You weren't.
Yeah, but we're not allowed to sell it. We're not allowed to deal with it at all. Yeah.
Right. Oh, didn't ken that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Right, we'll move on then. That seemed to be quite a simple one. This one's not as simple.
Yeah.
Or maybe it is, I don't know.
Yeah.
The marriage of Aisha, Prophet. That's one that people like to bring that one up.
Yeah, this is the big one, isn't it?
This seems to be the big one,
It is the big one, yeah. And I can understand why there's confusion, because there's actually confusion in text. There is from a hadith collection, which is probably the most famous hadith collection. There's two narrations in there where it says that she got married to the Prophet when she was 6, and then she consummated that marriage when she was 9 years old. So there's many scholars that have written articles on this. Some scholars say that there's nothing wrong with it. Right? Some imams say there's nothing wrong with it, and because it was over 1,000 years ago and time has changed. The view that I take is I don't believe that she was 6 or 9 when the consummation happened or where the marriage happened, and it's because when I researched into the issue, there was a subtle point that one of the imams mentioned, and he said that she got married to the Prophet when he moved from Mecca to Medina. So I don't know if you're familiar with the life of the Prophet. He received revelation in Mecca, and he preached for 13 years, but not many people accepted him, and they wanted to. They were at a point where they wanted to kill him now.
Right.
So he got revelation that moved to the next city, which is a few hundred miles away. When he moved there, that's called the year of migration, and that's where the Islamic calendar starts. So he got married to Aisha 2 years after migration to Medina. And the point he mentions is that Aisha's elder sister was 27 years old at the time of migration, and Aisha was 10 years younger than her, which means that at the time of migration, Aisha had to be 17.
Right.
And then at the time of marriage, she had to be 19. So based on those dates, we would then say that there's a mistake in that hadith. And they weren't stringent, and then they were also saying that they weren't stringent on historical facts. In hadith collections, they were only strict on if it was an Islamic ruling, like you need to pray your prayers, or you need to pay this much in charity every year, or you need to fast in Ramadan. They're more strict on those chains, and they weren't strict on the historical, other historical facts.
So what was the what year? What approximate time of what year was it that this happened? So that's what I'm trying to say. How long ago did this happen, Mansoor?
Well, just over 1400 years.
Because
1400 years ago.
What I wanted to contrast that with is apparently in Scottish law.
Yep.
Scottish law prior to the 1900s.
Yes.
A wife should be endowed if she attained the age of 9 years. So basically, common law, persons may marry at any age, but a woman was not allowed to marry until she was 9 here in Scotland. So that was in the 1900s, so that's obviously a lot later than what Mansoor's talking about. Now, Bible scholars also, they would reputedly Mary, who married Joseph, and then they had Jesus, or well, Jesus kind of came out of Mary. But anyway, because there's Immaculate Conception to deal with. But anyway, Mary was reputedly 12, Joseph was 90. And then the third thing here... 90 years old, he was very old. So that was another reason I think people were surprised, that she got pregnant. The third thing here is in the Old Testament here.
She was 12.
Oh,
Yeah, okay, but well done for being 90. When God was talking to his people after they'd done the whole thing, they were in Egypt and they ran around the desert for a while, and then they became their people. They're going to go out and forward and start conquering all these nations all round about them. In the book of Numbers, way back in the time of Moses, God says to his people, when you go and you kill everybody, go and kill everybody, all your enemies, kill all the men, kill all the women, kill all the children, but the virgin children, girls, keep them for yourself. And this is widely, all the infants among the women who have not known the lying of a male, you can keep alive for yourselves. And this is widely considered to mean that you can have them as your spoils. You can't take the married woman, you can't take the women who are not virgins. You can take the infant virgins, and they were sex slaves for the Jewish people or the Israelites by command of God. So within the Bible there, it's made explicitly clear it's perfectly fine to have sex with enemy children if they're girls. So again, by comparison, now the only reason I bring these things up is like you say, yes, but Christians nowadays don't go around doing that sort of thing. Well, I'm assuming this is what Mansoor is telling us as well, or he's reckoning that this woman was 17. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible, there's a lot of stuff in the Quran, that although it's there, and it was there 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, it's not happening here in the 21st century. And it's unfair, it would be unfair to point at Christians and say, you lot are all pedos because of what it says here. You lot are all pedos because of what Joseph did when Joseph took a wife at 90 years old. That's not fair, if you're a Christian. Neither is it fair to take that verses like that out of the context of the Quran and say that Muslims are murderers or pedos or whatever it may be.
So my question would be regarding these sort of younger age marriages and stuff. Should God not have known that things would change so drastically and then sort of plan ahead? That seems like a terrible London, but could it not have planned ahead?
Back to this updating thing you were talking about.
I'm just insulting everybody here. It's great.
That's the spirit.
But could it not have planned ahead and sort of it differently? I mean, obviously you're arguing that Aisha wasn't 8, but these situations did happen, even if not with Muhammad.
Yeah.
I would ask Bill, but Bill's.
Yeah,
I'm not here to defend the Bible. I'm just here to tell you what's in the Bible. I'm not here to defend Islam. I'm here to compare the Quran and the Bible, Islam and Christianity. Yeah. But I mean, if you're asking, when I
was asking for when you were a Christian.
All right. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm now an agnostic, so I'm halfway between you two, so I'm perfect. I mean, you're a believer, you're an atheist, I'm in the middle, and my answer to that is going to put my hands up and say, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, right, within the Bible, I've never read the Quran more than about 3 verses of the Quran that I looked up on the internet once. Within this book, there is so much mad stuff you would not believe. It's just incredibly crazy. That if you read this book from start to finish, there is mental, mind-blowing stuff. And when you talk about doing drugs and so forth, if there's stuff in here that you wouldn't even conceive about writing a story unless you are mega wasted on every kind of psychotropic that you can think of.
It's not like insulting.
It's mental stuff. Oh, it's absolutely crazy. But the thing is, it's like, but then you say, well, that's the difference between between you and an ant. Right? Between what you know and you understand and what an ant knows and understands. So an ant will try to figure out human behaviour, and an ant will be like, dude, right, what is going on here? You know, we don't get this. We just go and collect food, we build a hive, or whatever you call it, an ant's nest, and then we make queen ants and make babies. That's it. That's our life, man. And the more food that we eat, the better it is, you know. Yeah. I mean, what a great life they've got. It's like us trying to understand. For me, when I was a Christian, I would say that's us trying to understand the mad, crazy stuff that is in here. It's just, you've touched on stuff like bears ripping people apart and all sorts of stuff. It's just mental. And we had this fantastic story about fire coming from heaven when we're coming up in the car and everything, you know. But that's my response.
Aren't you super happy Bill's here?
But Mansoor have a much better answer for this.
And I mean, within our religion, we've got that kind of update is there. So there's a very famous saying of the Prophet Muhammad where he says that the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets.
You touched on this a wee bit earlier.
So now the Prophet has gone, it's up to the scholars to do that. So in Muslim countries, they have set an age that I know in Egypt you can't get married unless you're 16. And they have a fatwa council where it's a group of legal experts who make the Islamic rulings within that country. But then you'll have some cultures that will still follow that. As a cultural thing, I know in Saudi Arabia is a massive country. There's certain very conservative cultures there that still get children married off when they're 12 years old. But it won't be that the man is 40 and the girl is 12. It's the both of them. The boy will be probably 13 or 14 and the girl will be 12.
I've heard about, I don't know which countries it was, but there was apparently a couple of countries where, according to the law, legally, if parents give the consent, a child could be married away at 3. But when that happens, no one's happy about it. Like, it's a legal loophole, but everybody tends to be against it. Can't remember which country it was, but I remember being told about it. So that's maybe another thing to touch on that. It's a legal loophole stuck in the law, but no one's for it. People were actually quite strongly against it.
Well, it's ridiculous. I personally, I think you should be well over 20 before you get. Because I remember being 20, 21. I thought I was still a child at 21. I couldn't make decisions properly. And I got married at 27. I got married 2 years ago. So no way. Even though the law, certain laws are 16, some laws are 18. I still think that's still too young.
I think marriage should be illegal.
Some people are against it.
There you go. Bear in mind you're speaking to young people here, you know, to be sensitive to your audience. Easy.
Shit.
Turn your phone off.
That's Sputnik.
Sorry.
No, you can phone the back. You can phone the back.
It's, it makes it more like a real podcast.
Well, so you got two sides on that. I'm strongly for the one where she was 17 and 19. They were really, really bad with dates. I don't know how he got within that hadith. It was 6 and 9. We're really bad in Islamic history. You've got so many narrations of a single event, and it makes you think, well, it was such a serious event. Weren't you all watching it? Like there's a very famous event of the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, Hussein, who was killed in Iraq. Because he rebelled. He went against the caliph at the time. He didn't accept him as the caliph. And you'll get certain narrations they'll say, well, he had 20 stab wounds inside him. Then you get another narration that says that, well, he had 100 arrows in him. And then you get another narration that'll say, well, he wasn't hit by an arrow. And then when you look at everything, you think, well, so many people were watching. Was he hit by an arrow or was he not? So we're really bad, because it was oral tradition. At that time, the Prophet Muhammad's first wife, the popular narration is that he was 25 and she was 40 when they got married, and then there's another narration that says that he was 25 and she was 27. And the difference is ridiculous. Was she 40 or was she 27? No. So they're really bad with ages, and they wouldn't keep dates at that time. They would base their birth on maybe like an event that took place. My granny is still like that, who's in her 80s, and she's from Pakistan. And I'll be like, when were you born? And she's like, the year when that flood came, that's when I was born. That's how she said it. There's no, because she was born in a village, in a remote village in Pakistan, no birth certificate, nothing.
So how do you know she's 80?
Well, we know she's roughly about that much.
It's quite wrinkly.
I'm guessing she's 80.
But it's the same. Like you spoken, Craig, about how there was a massive gap between after Jesus died and when they wrote all the Gospels and stuff about him. It's been 70 and 100 years after after it happened. It was all written down. It was oral tradition, with the result that in the Bible, the guy Judas who betrayed Jesus, he dies twice in different ways. Once he hangs himself, and then the other time he's going along the field and he falls over and he's disemboweled. Because he falls on something sharp. So within the same story, and you actually, so I remember in Bible college actually having an argument with someone about how Judas died, and then eventually we went and looked at it and just turned the page over. He dies again. Exactly what you said. It's like it's narration. It's all oral. Then of course that opens the door to people sort of saying, well, how can you trust anything that's in it? Because
is that the Christian understanding? Is that because it was oral, there's mistakes in the Bible?
Well, no. The Christians will tell you that this is the infallible word of God, and what they'll say is, well, what they'll try and reconcile it. I mean, if you read it, it's two separate events and they're separate. But what a Christian would tell you, a fundamental Christian would say, no, what happened was that he was hung and disemboweled at the same. He hung himself and disemboweled himself at the same time. So both stories are true. But no, what happens is one story hangs himself and then he's dead. Another story is walking across the field and he falls over onto something sharp and he gets disemboweled by mistake and he dies. So basically it's an inconsistency, it's a mistake in the Bible. But Christians are saying, no, there's no mistake. There can't be a mistake because this is the infallible word of God. And as a fundamental Christian, then we take every single word of this literally. And then what they try to do is then tie themselves in knots to make that. Like when it says, a rich man cannot inherit the kingdom of God. This is a way to get any Christian whatsoever. They will then start making all sorts up until then they're saying this is the word of God and I will not budge for it, and it's literally true every single word. And it says, so if you're rich you're going to go to hell. And that's what they'll say about Judas. They'll just start fluffing.
Nice.
We've got about 4 minutes left of recording time there, so
4 minutes. Alright. Well, establishing a caliphate, we'll just get to this.
Yeah.
Can you do that in 4 minutes?
There is a group.
I could reset the camera again and go another 25 minutes if we need to.
And there is no. I can't answer in a minute. Well, last in a minute, we have a group within the UK that they believe that their mission is to turn the UK government into an Islamic government. The majority of the scholars, the text Quran says that follow God, follow His Prophet, and follow those that are in command. And the scholars all agree that whichever country you live in, you need to follow the government that you're underneath. And if you pledged allegiance to the Queen and the government here by accepting a passport, you have to. You're not allowed to rebel against them. because you're under their protection.
See, that would be an area where I disagree with.
Yeah.
I think you should be totally allowed to rebel against the state.
Well, not in the way where you want to overthrow their. Obviously, if you want to do it politically and democratically, then fine. But
so there's an identical parallel in the New Testament as well, where
No.
Jesus says, "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's," and they actually came to him and specifically asked him, and they said, "Rabbi, we're of the kingdom of God. To whom do we pay our taxes? To Caesar or to God?" And it says, "Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, render unto God that which is God's." And later on in the New Testament it talks about being subject to the authorities of the land. But the caliphate bit, Jesus says to him, one of the last words he says, he went to heaven, he died, he went to heaven, he came back, and he said, and tells his disciples, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you." So basically he's saying, go out into the whole world and make everybody into a Christian to obey me. There's a Christian caliphate right there, exact parallel. So don't worry about the Muslim caliphate, guys. The Christian caliphate's coming. You're all going to be Christians.
My favourite thing that happened is that while Mansoor was talking about you can't just overthrow the government, you need to do it democratically.
Yeah.
Bill's wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt.
Hey, there you go. There you go. Jesus was a Palestinian radical, guys.
Plus, it doesn't make any sense because you've got Saudi Arabia already. That's a Muslim country. So if you really love that, then move there and live there. You're not allowed. We haven't got this concept of going on the attack and ruling for no reason, taking over a country for no reason. So all the battles that were at the time of the Prophet were in retaliation of an attack that came first. There wasn't this command of go and conquer everything. There was that preach your religion. And try to make everybody Muslim, but not, by forcing them. Just preach the religion and hope that everybody accepts. And if not, then that's up to them.
Nice.
And as simple as that. Yeah.
Well, I think we'll end it there then because we've run out of camera space.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mansoor, for coming up and doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Pretty good. Thank you, Bill, for bringing him up.
Thank you very much.
Still feel bad about drinking water, but it's all good.
I know, I was
That's
drinking
all right.
that, I was like, oh.
Cultural sensitivity, who'd have thought? See?
Apologies.
Apologies.
Thank you very much for
Definitely.
coming up. Cheerio, bye.
Thank you. Peace.